What if I told you that the Vikings conquered the endless polar night with the help of ordinary waste? In a world where winter lasted for months and the sun barely rose above the horizon, fire was not just a convenience. It was synonymous with life.
Father, accept this offering. Guide us with your wisdom.
But keeping the flames burning for weeks on end, when every log counted, required ingenious engineering clad in the simplest of materials. They created a system that turned the leftovers from their feasts into a reliable source of light and, more importantly, constant, round-the-clock heat. It was a technology born of desperation and forged by centuries of observation. We are not talking about blazing bonfires, but about a quiet, stubborn flame that burned in the heart of every home while blizzards raged outside. The Vikings learned to conserve energy and stretch it out over time, using what others considered rubbish.
Here, take this. It will warm your blood.
Thank you, my love. The storm howls loud tonight.
Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how simple animal fat, a piece of soapstone, and a handful of bog moss were turned into an autonomous heater capable of burning for days on end. What I am about to reveal will change your perception of survival in Scandinavia. Darkness for a Viking was not just the absence of light. It was a living, oppressive entity. Deep in the fjords, among the snow-capped mountains, the polar night, or skamdegi, blurred the boundaries between day and night. The sun became a pale memory, and the world plunged into twilight for months on end. It was a time when the world of the living shrank to the size of a single longhouse. The psychological pressure of this darkness was unimaginable for modern man. It gave rise to fears and revived legends of trolls and hidden creatures roaming in the darkness. To step outside the circle of light meant stepping into a void where the only landmarks were the icy wind and the crunch of snow. Fire was the only anchor keeping the mind grounded in reality. The physical cold was an equally treacherous enemy. Frost bound the earth, turning the simple task of gathering firewood into a dangerous expedition. Wood, the main source of heat, was consumed at an alarming rate. Maintaining a large fire required enormous resources, which were often in short supply until spring arrived. In these conditions, the longhouse, or langhus, became the last bastion. Its construction, with thick turf walls and a low roof, was designed to conserve every joule of heat. But the heat escaped, and without a constant source of fire, the house quickly turned into an icy tomb. It was this environment that gave rise to the demand for a different type of fire. What was needed was not a fierce, wood-consuming fire for cooking, but something else. A source of light and heat was needed that was economical, reliable, and most importantly, long-lasting. A fire was needed that could survive the night without constant supervision. The Vikings were masters of survival, and they turned their attention to the most concentrated source of energy they had. This source was not trees, but what sustained their own lives. They realized that the fat that gave them strength could also give strength to fire. Thus began the era of oil lamps, which became the heart of the Scandinavian home. They were small, but their flame was stubborn. They could not replace the central hearth, but they could complement it, bringing light to dark corners and maintaining warmth when the hearth died down. This technology was not just a domestic solution, it was a strategic advantage. It allowed crafts to continue, and tools and weapons to be repaired during the long winter evenings. The light of the lamp meant that life did not stop, but simply shifted to a different, more focused rhythm.
But Freydis stood her ground, shield in hand, defying the invaders with a scream that echoed across the fjord.
The lamp's fire was quiet, It did not crackle like wood in a bonfire. It was a rich, oily light that cast deep shadows. But it was this light that allowed people to see the faces of their loved ones, tell sagas, and wait for spring. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think was more frightening for people of that era? An external enemy or an endless winter? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel.
This is good, just us together.
It is. The gods willing.
Are you ready to learn the truth about what really fueled Viking civilization? That fuel was fat. In a harsh climate where agriculture was risky, animal husbandry was the foundation of prosperity. Cows, sheep, goats, and pigs provided not only meat and milk, but also an invaluable energy resource, solid animal fat or talc. The process of obtaining this fuel was simple but labor-intensive. After slaughtering the animal, the raw fat was carefully separated and slowly melted over low heat. This procedure, known as rendering, allowed pure fat to be separated from protein impurities and water. The quality of the final product depended directly on the thoroughness of this process. The resulting rendered fat, or lard, was a versatile product. It was white or yellowish, solid at room temperature, and had a high energy value. It could be stored for months without fear of spoilage, making it an ideal canned fuel for the winter.
They said the snows would be too deep this year, that the stores wouldn't last. But look at us now!
The fat was poured into wooden barrels or clay pots and stored in cool pantries. It was not only fuel, but also an important part of the diet, and was used to lubricate leather goods and preserve wood. Its value was comparable to that of grain or metal. In addition to domestic animals, the bounty of the sea was an important source of fat. The Vikings were unsurpassed sailors and hunters. The fat of marine mammals, such as seals, was another important resource. It provided fuel that burned brightly, although it had a strong, distinctive odor.
Pull harder, men!
Fishing also contributed. Oil was rendered from the livers of cod and other fatty fish. This oil, known as fish oil, was more liquid than animal fat. It required lamps of a different design, but was available in huge quantities in coastal settlements. Not all fat was the same. Fat from different parts of the carcass varied in quality. Internal fat was considered the purest and provided the highest quality fuel, which smoked and smelled less. But fat alone was not enough. In the next chapter, we will talk about a material that was more important than iron for creating comfort, a stone that could drink fire.
Ready? Heave. It's in place.
I discovered it by accident while studying old sagas, the secret of the stone that the Vikings valued more than gold. This material was steatite, or as it is more commonly known, soapstone. This modest-looking greyish mineral had a set of unique properties that made it the ideal material for creating durable heaters. The main advantage of soapstone was its softness. It was so malleable that it could be cut with a regular knife or chisel, almost like hard wood. This allowed the Vikings to carve bowls, pots, and of course lamps from solid pieces of stone, without the need for complex metallurgical tools. But softness was only half the story. The second and key property was its incredible heat resistance and heat capacity. Soapstone could withstand direct fire without cracking or breaking. It slowly absorbed heat, and then slowly and evenly released it into the surrounding space. It was this property that turned a simple lamp into a miniature heater. The stone bowl, heated by the flame, itself became a source of soft, radiant heat. This heat was retained for hours, even after the fuel was exhausted. The Vikings quickly appreciated this material. In Norway and Sweden, there were entire quarries where steatite was mined. Thousands of artifacts have been found, from rough blanks to to exquisitely carved vessels, indicating the industrial scale of this craft. The lamps themselves, or lysica, had a distinctive shape. Most often, they were simple, shallow bowls, sometimes with a small spout or groove for the wick. More complex versions had a stem or handle, and some were decorated with simple geometric patterns. The manufacturing process was simple. The craftsman found a suitable piece of rock and began to carve out the outer shape. Then he painstakingly hollowed out the inner cavity. Each blow was carefully measured, because too thin a wall could crack, and too thick a wall would take away precious fuel volume. This technology was accessible to almost everyone. It did not require a forge or rare materials. All that was needed was stone, simple tools, and patience. This made soapstone a truly popular material. Soapstone was also used to make hearthstones and metal casting molds. Its ability to accumulate heat was in demand in many areas of life. But it was in lamps that its properties were fully revealed, allowing the creation of a reliable and safe source of light. If you think the craftsmanship of ancient stonecutters deserves respect, please like this video. Guess what common weed the Vikings used to light a flame? The stone bowl and fat were just the body and fuel, but the soul of the lamp, the thing that turned fat into fire, was the wick. The choice of material for the wick was no less important than the quality of the fuel. The main requirement for a wick was its hygroscopicity, or in simpler terms, its ability to absorb and draw fuel upward. The wick worked on the principle of capillary action. Liquid, melted fat or oil rose through its fibers to the tip, where combustion took place. The most accessible and common material for wicks was ordinary bog moss. Sphagnum, which grew in abundance in the bogs of Scandinavia, had phenomenal absorbency. It was collected, carefully dried, and twisted into strands of the required thickness. Moss produced an even, though not very bright, flame. It smoldered well and burned slowly, making it ideal for long, economical burning. It was a free and renewable resource available to everyone. Other plant fibers could be used as an alternative to moss. Often, waste from weaving production, such as flax or hemp sheaves, was used. These fibers were strong and absorbed fat well. Flax wicks produced a brighter and cleaner flame. Sometimes the wick was made from a twisted strip of fabric, such as old woolen or linen clothing. The Vikings did not throw away anything that could be useful. A worn-out tunic was given a second life as a source of light. The wick did not just burn, it required maintenance. As it burned, soot formed at its tip, which interfered with the flame and increased the amount of smoke. The lamp had to be periodically serviced, using special tweezers or simply a knife to remove the soot and tighten the wick. The intensity of the flame depended on the position of the wick. If the wick was raised too high, the lamp began to smoke and quickly consume fuel. If it was lowered too low, the flame was dim and could go out. The ability to adjust the lamp correctly was an important domestic skill. This simple system of 3 components, stone, fat, and moss, was the height of efficiency. It had no moving parts, was incredibly reliable, and ran on readily available resources. But how could this small flame heat an entire room? In the next chapter, we will explore the physics of heat in a Viking home. Although solid fat was the staple, the Viking world of fuel was much more diverse. The use of a particular fuel depended on the region, wealth, and season. There was a whole fuel hierarchy, with each type having its pros and cons. At the top of this hierarchy was pure, well-rendered beef or sheep fat. It was solid, lasted the longest, and produced the cleanest flame. Such a lamp produced the least smoke and had almost no unpleasant odor. It was the fuel for living quarters, the fuel of wealthy homes. One step below were more affordable types of fat. Pork fat, for example, was softer and melted at a lower temperature. It was good, but it did not keep as well and could go rancid more quickly, which affected the smell when burned. Fish oil accounted for a huge share of the fuel balance, especially in coastal areas. Cod liver, herring, whales, all were sources of an oily liquid that burned well. Fish oil was cheap and available in huge quantities. However, fish oil had a significant drawback: its smell. A lamp filled with this fuel filled the room with a heavy, specific aroma. In addition, this fuel smoked more heavily, covering the walls and ceiling with a layer of greasy soot. Another important resource, especially for hunting communities, was the fat of marine mammals. Blubber rendered from seal fat was an incredibly high-calorie fuel. It produced a bright, hot flame that was valued in craft workshops where good lighting was required.
This spear must fly true, young one. The fjord ice is unforgiving, and we cannot return empty-handed.
In addition to fats and oils, the Vikings also used plant-based components. Pine resin, or sap, was known for its combustible properties. It was not used in its pure form, as it burned too quickly and produced a lot of smoke. More often, resin or tar was added to fat. This mixture burned hotter and longer than pure fat. The resin acted as a thickener and stabilizer, allowing the flame to be more stable. Such cocktails were often used for street torches or signal fires. Want to know the secret that allowed a fire to burn for a whole day without supervision? The mention of a 24-hour heater is not entirely a myth, but it requires an important clarification. It was not about a bright flame, but about continuous, economical burning that maintained light and heat for a long time. The key to this lay in a combination of three factors: the size of the lamp, the type of fuel, and the design of the wick. For long burning, it was not small hand lamps that were used, but large, massive bowls made of soapstone. Some of them could hold several kilograms of fuel. The fuel for such long-burning lamps was exclusively solid animal fat. A block of fat was placed whole in a stone bowl. The wick, made of moss or tow, was laid so that its tip barely protruded. The lit wick began to burn, giving off heat. This heat was enough to melt a small pool of liquid fat directly around the wick. This pool fed the flame. The rest of the fat in the bowl remained solid. As the liquid fuel burned out, the heat from the wick and the heated stone slowly melted the next layer of solid fat. This process was very slow and self-regulating. The smaller the flame, the slower the fat melted, and vice versa. Such a system could not produce a bright light. It was more like a dim glow, similar to the flame of a modern lamp. But it was enough to dispel the absolute darkness in the sleeping corner of the house and prevent the temperature from falling to a critical level. A massive soapstone played a crucial role here. When heated, it stabilized the temperature around the wick. Even if the flame weakened for a moment, the hot stone continued to melt the fat, maintaining combustion. The stone acted as a heat accumulator. Such a lamp could burn for a very long time. With the wick properly adjusted and a sufficient supply of fuel, it could indeed smolder for 24 hours or even longer. It was the ideal night mode for a long house. The family could go to bed knowing that there was a source of fire left in the house. In the morning, there was no need to waste time striking sparks in the cold darkness. It was enough to simply lift the wick in the smoldering lamp to get a full flame. In the next chapter, you will learn where exactly these sources of life were located in the Longhouse. The Viking Longhouse was a whole world under one roof, and the light in it was distributed strictly functionally. Life was concentrated around two types of fire: a large central hearth and many small oil lamps. Each of them played its own irreplaceable role.
We should start repairing the roof before the rains come.
I agree. I can gather the timber tomorrow.
The central hearth, or eldstedi, was the heart of the house. It was a long, open fire located along the central axis of the room. It provided the main source of heat for heating and was used for cooking. The smoke from it escaped through openings in the roof. This fire provided a lot of light, but only in the central part of the house. The side aisles, where the sleeping benches and workplaces were located, remained in semi-darkness. This is where oil lamps came into play. Lysica lamps were mobile and versatile. They were placed where a local light source was needed. The most common place was in niches in the walls, carved directly into the turf or wood. The lamp was placed there, and its flame illuminated the sleeping area. Wealthier homeowners could afford hanging lamps. A stone bowl was placed in a special iron hoop with chains, which was attached to the roof beams. Such a lamp hung above a table or workplace, providing good, downward light. There were also simple stands. These could be wooden poles with a carved platform at the top, or wrought iron floor lamps. A lamp raised to human height provided more diffused light and fewer shadows. Light was necessary for the crafts that the Vikings engaged in during the long winters. Women spun wool and wove on vertical looms. Men repaired weapons and carved wood or bone. All this painstaking work required good lighting, which was provided by oil lamps. The quality of light from a fat lamp is very different from what we are used to. It was a warm yellow-orange light. It was lively, the flame constantly flickering from drafts, casting bizarre, deep shadows on the walls. This flickering twilight created a special atmosphere. It was ideal for telling sagas and legends. A skald sitting by the fire and faces illuminated by the oil light. This picture was the essence of a winter evening in a Viking's house.
Soared high above the fjord, carrying the prayers of the fallen to Odin himself. He raised the hammer high, Mjolnir blazing bright against the frost giants, and struck a blow that echoed through the 9 realms. The waves crashed high, tasting the sky, as Thor raised his hammer high.
The question of whether the Viking lamp was a full-fledged heater is key. It is difficult for modern people to imagine that a small bowl of fat could heat a room. Indeed, one lamp could not replace a central hearth. The secret lay not in power, but in the cumulative effect and insulation. The longhouse of the Vikings was designed like a thermos. The walls of turf and stone could be up to 1 meter thick. The low roof, also covered with turf, minimized heat loss. In such a well-insulated space, every source of heat was valued. The main one was the central hearth, but it did not burn all the time. Keeping it burning all night was too wasteful in terms of firewood. That's when oil lamps, especially large ones made of soapstone, came to the fore. As we have already mentioned, the stone itself, when heated, became a heat accumulator. It radiated soft infrared heat for a long time. In a large house, several such lamps could burn at the same time. Their total heat output was quite noticeable. They did not create heat, but they effectively maintained the temperature, preventing the house from cooling down. Other sources of heat should not be forgotten. In the same building, often behind a partition, there was livestock. Large animals gave off a huge amount of heat. This heat also went towards heating the common space. People themselves also contributed. Several dozen people sleeping in one room are also a significant source of heat. All these factors combined to form a single passive heating system. The purpose of the heating lamp was not to heat the air from zero, but to compensate for heat loss. It maintained a temperature several degrees higher than outside. In the conditions of the Arctic winter, this difference was the difference between life and freezing. The oil lamp was ideal for this role. It consumed little expensive fuel compared to a wood fire. It could burn unattended, which was critical at night. The very idea of a waste heater is the quintessence of the Viking worldview. In their world, there was no such thing as garbage in the modern sense. Every object, every remnant had its value and its use. The economy was waste-free by necessity. Animal fat was a prime example of this. The best, purest varieties were used for food. The lower quality fat was used to preserve leather and wood and to make soap. Only the fat that was unsuitable for anything else was used in lamps. Rancid fat, which was no longer edible, was still an excellent fuel. Old, stale lard that had been lying around for too long was also put to good use. This was a sensible way of managing resources where nothing went to waste. Even more telling is the story of bone fat. After the meat was eaten, the bones were not thrown away. They were crushed into small pieces and boiled in water for a long time. The fat floated to the surface and was carefully collected. This bone fat, or baenfit, was low quality but completely free fuel. It was the last energy that could be extracted from an animal. Its smell when burned was probably terrible, but in farm buildings or in the most desperate times, it was a lifesaver. The same was true for fishing. After the fish were cut up, the heads, entrails, and bones remained. All of this also went into the cauldron to be rendered into technical fish oil. This cloudy, smelly product was the fuel of the poor and the inhabitants of coastal villages. This system allowed for the maximum calories to be extracted from each resource obtained. First, the calories went into food, sustaining people. Then the remaining calories went into lamps, providing light and heat. It was a closed energy cycle. Such economy was not a sign of poverty, but a sign of wisdom. It allowed communities to survive in conditions of extremely limited resources. It taught them to value every little thing and see potential in what seemed useless. The waste-powered oil lamp is a symbol of sustainability. It showed that even from leftovers, something vital could be created. It was a lesson in efficiency that the Vikings mastered perfectly. When we immerse ourselves in the technologies of the past, we often forget about the sensory experience. A Viking longhouse lit by oil lamps was filled with very special smells. This aroma was an integral part of life, as familiar as the cold outside. The main component of this bouquet was the smell of burning fat. Depending on the quality of the fuel, it could be the almost neutral aroma of melted lard or the heavy, suffocating smell of fish oil and tallow. The air was saturated with an oily haze. The flame of a fat lamp, especially one with a moss wick, was smoky. It produced fine soot that settled on everything. The walls, ceiling beams, utensils, everything was covered with a thin, greasy film. This soot mixed with the smoke from the central hearth. Although the smoke escaped through holes in the roof, most of it remained inside, saturating the wood and fabrics. The smell of smoke and smoked wood was a constant background. Other smells of life were added to these aromas. The house smelled of wet wool from drying clothes, freshly tanned leather, and tar used to lubricate equipment. The attached part of the house smelled of livestock, hay, and manure. And let's not forget the smells of the people themselves. In conditions where hot water was a luxury and soap was an expensive commodity, hygiene was a peculiar affair. The smell of unwashed bodies and sweat was as normal as everything else. For us, such air would seem unbearable. It was heavy, thick, and low in oxygen. But for people of that era, it was the smell of home, the smell of security.
Well done, wife.
Aye, eat hearty. The winter is long, but we are safe here.
We see how a simple necessity gave rise to an ingenious technology. The Viking lamp is not just a light fixture, it is an entire survival system. It is the perfect combination of material, fuel, and design, honed by centuries of living in harsh conditions. Soapstone, which accumulates heat, and solid fat, which melts slowly, turned an ordinary bowl into an economical and durable heater. They learned to extract energy from everything around them, including waste. This ability to see a resource in every bone, every drop of fat, was their main strength. They did not conquer nature. They became its most efficient part, using its laws for their own benefit. What other aspects of Viking or other ancient cultures would you like us to cover? Perhaps you are interested in their metallurgy, shipbuilding, or food system. Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the past.